I'm currently reading Giovanni's Room, and when I tell you the writing is so beautiful, I can't even begin to describe it. I've not read writing this beautiful in a very long time. I'm absolutely loving it. I love this book. You can tell by how much I've outlined it and tabbed it. And I'm only on chapter 3. We haven't even made it to Giovanni's Room yet. One thing about this book that makes me very nervous is the fact that I know that the ending is going to be heartbreaking. I know that from the foreshadowing. We already know the tragedy is coming. But in life, we know that tragedy comes. We know the tragedy is coming. We know that this is finite. But I think when you know specifically, it just breaks your heart. Like, my heart is already broken. And like I said, I'm only on chapter 3. We have met Giovanni. I now know the narrator's name is David. And we've met a few characters along the way by chapter 3. Even one very strange, sinister character that kind of slinks in and lets us know that all is not well. But the writing, let me give you a couple of examples. My father had money in his account, which belonged to me, but he was very reluctant to send it because he wanted me to come home. To come home, as he said, and settle down. And whenever he said that, I thought of the sediment at the bottom of a stagnant pond. Giovanni's face, which I had memorized so many mornings, noons, and nights, hardened before my eyes, began to give in secret places, began to crack. The light in his eyes became glitter. The wide and beautiful brow began to suggest the skull beneath. The sensual lips turned inward, busy with the sorrow overflowing from his heart. Became a stranger's face, or it made me so guilty to look on him that I wished it was a stranger's face. Today is hair washing day. Hair is washed and molded, and I will curl it later. I'm headed out. When I come back, I will finish my hair and dig deeper into my book because it is so good. This book by James Baldwin was published in 1956. So 50s Paris he's writing about. As far as I know, he is writing about an American named David. David, the American, is the narrator. And it is 169 pages long. At one point, we're in the south of France, but we go to Paris. And Paris is like another character in the book. And the way he describes Paris, that is what makes this book so beautiful. His descriptions of Paris, his descriptions of the people, the emotion. It's just... wow, I'm so surprised. And I don't know why. I didn't know what to expect from a James Baldwin book because I had never read one. I have never read one. So that's very interesting. I've seen interviews with him. Obviously, I did not know the literature was this like literary, if that makes sense. I probably sound really dumb, but I don't mean to. My point is, I don't understand why my class wasn't assigned this book in school. I'm wanting to say people read this in our school probably in like 10th grade. But I think because of the class that I was in, I wasn't assigned this. And I hate that. I hate that I'm this age and just now reading this book because it's actually pretty beautiful so far. So the places mentioned, south of France, Paris, Spain, Italy, and New York. Our narrator, David, who is arguably not the main character because it's Giovanni's room. So I guess Giovanni's the main character. But, you know, there's, you know how that goes in books. Just because he is the title character doesn't mean that he's the main character. I mean, we are following David, the narrator, who you don't find out his name until the second chapter, unless I missed it somewhere in the first. We don't actually know who we're listening to until the second chapter. And we don't officially meet Giovanni until page 29. There's a lot of romantic tension there. And I love how Baldwin opens up about that. Like, it's for 1956, one would not think that it would be that open. Like, we actually experience the moment when David realizes that his preference is not women. So, yeah, that's what has taken place in this book. I know I'm being very vague because if you want to read the book, I don't want to give it away for you or give it away. Yeah, I don't want to give it away. I don't want to spoil it for you. But my thoughts are kind of unfolding with the book, and so I'm sharing them here because this is, a reading vlog, and that's what you do in a reading vlog, right? From the very beginning, the way that he describes where he is and the people around him and his feelings on things, and the fact that he has a fiance that he really should not have proposed to, and even his feelings on that, it's all very raw to me, and it's all very raw and very vulnerable. That's the word. That's the word. I could have summed all of this up by just telling you that it was vulnerable, and I would have saved 7 minutes. I haven't read very many books like this, so I am doing some self-reflection because at the end of the day, I feel like when you read a book, it should tell you something about yourself. This is doing that. It's hair washing day, and I think this is a great opportunity for me to read. I've just molded my hair with a new product, and I can't wait to see how it works. I'm gonna let this dry. So while I'm letting this dry, I think I'm gonna read. I feel like that's a good use of my time. I'm gonna turn on some YouTube videos for background noise, and then I'm gonna try to finish the 3rd chapter of Giovanni's Room. Yeah. I think it should take my hair about an hour to fully dry. I'm not gonna rush it, but I have some snacks. I got some pistachios. I did not make up my bed this morning, you guys. Shame on me. Okay. And I also got the Kavita sparkling lemonade with prebiotics. This is a prebiotic drink for gut health. I should probably also get some sort of probiotic, but I don't have that. So I'm going with the prebiotic, and I have my water cup from Starbucks. I'm just gonna pour this in it. There's a little tiny bit of ice left at the bottom, and that should be enough. Sometimes when I drink cold drinks, it gives me like heartburn. I probably need to get that checked out. Didn't fill it all the way up, but that's enough. I love these prebiotic sodas. And then I also drink sometimes we have kombucha, and I drink that for my probiotic, or yogurt. I have some yogurt for the probiotic. So that's nice. Not too apple cider vinegar-y, but it's 14 grams of carbs, 3 grams of fiber. So I will go. And there's 4 grams of added sugars, so not too sugary. It also, because it's fizzy and sparkling, it satisfies my need to drink soda, because I love a good soda. And right now, that's my biggest guilty pleasure, because I can't drink alcohol. Soda and coffee it is, which I'm okay with. So I'm gonna turn on YouTube and probably just turn on something that I can listen to in the background while I read. If I'm being honest, I sometimes find it very hard to concentrate. There's noise outside. I probably should turn off the TV, but if it's too quiet, I still can't concentrate. And it's also hard to eat pistachios while reading a book. I didn't really think that through. I also got cold too, so I decided to start on my hair. And here is the finished product. It's soft, it's silky, and hopefully it stays put. So full disclosure, after I did my hair, I really tried to read the book, but I was so tired, you guys. So getting through chapter 3 was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. I kept dropping my book because I kept falling asleep last night. So I decided to give it a rest. But we have made it to Giovanni's room. And I suspect, because it wasn't explicitly written, that we know Giovanni carnally now. David has put us back to the beginning. So now we're back in the south of France. When we're back in the south of France where we actually started, he was leaving the big house that they were renting, he and his fiance, and going to Paris. Now we're back at the house. So I'm going to try to get through chapter 3. I've already gotten up and done a bit of my skincare because it's probably the only habit that I have that is actually a habit that I actually complete every single day. I got up and did that, part of it. just eye cream and vitamin C. And I'm going to let that sink in and try to read a few pages. And maybe I can get through chapter 3. We'll see. Okay, that went by faster than I thought. I'm on part 2. I'm assuming that this book only has 6 chapters. 6 very long chapters. So that last part was pretty cool. David is leaving the south of France. Whatever has happened to Giovanni has already happened, and he has found himself alone, but he's leaving. I don't know where he's going, but I'm assuming in part 2, we will find out what happened to Giovanni, and because something did, and where David ends up. But he has an interaction with the woman who owns the house, or who is the caretaker for the house that he was renting with his fiance. And they have to do like a walkthrough inspection before he leaves so that she can check off the house, check off things and make sure that he didn't trash her house. And she is written so beautifully because she is written like a mother figure. And because he's young, David, we find out, is about 26. Because he's young, she talks to him like he would be one of her children, but not in a patronizing way. And one of the things that is clearly stated in this part of the book, in the passages, is that men need women. She states it so clearly. And while David knows what his life is like and, what he has gone through, with being engaged, but finding that he may not even really be attracted to women, and meeting Giovanni and all that entails, he believes her. He believes that she's right, that a man does need a woman in his life. It's a very subtle way of saying how important women are. And we don't hear that very often now, especially older women, but most of the women that have been portrayed in this book, and there's only been a few, come off as very wise. We don't get to see a lot of his fiance in this first half. I don't know if we will get to see her in the second half because the book kind of jumps back and forth. But so far, 2 of the women that he has elaborated on in the book, we find that they are important, that they are seen as being wise and regal. And I like that. I like that a man can write that sensitively about women, especially because the character David, his mom, has passed on. So I like that he wrote in a wise woman figure. That much respect for that. I like that. And I like the interaction between them. It was beautiful. Then she asks abruptly, "Do you pray?" I wonder if I can stand another moment. No, I stammer. No, not often. But you are a believer. I smile. It is not even a patronizing smile, though. Perhaps I wish it could be yes. But I wonder what my smile could have looked like. It did not reassure her. You must pray, she says very soberly. I assure you. Even just a little prayer from time to time. Light a little candle. If it were not for the prayers of the blessed saints, one could not live in this world at all. I speak to you, she says, drawing herself up slightly as though I were your maman. Do not be offended. But I am not offended. You are very nice. You are very nice to speak to me this way. She smiles, a satisfied smile. Men, not just babies like you, but old men too. They always need a woman to tell them the truth. Les hommes, ils sont impossibles. She smiles and forces me to smile at the cunning of this universal joke and turns out the light in the master bedroom. Once I got through chapter 3 fairly quickly, I'm going to try to push into chapter 1 and part 2. But I hear my husband, and if that's the case, it's probably not going to happen. Because as soon as he sees me wake up in the morning, he starts talking. We shall see. And like clockwork, the house is alive. I have started receiving the texts from my family, and the jackhammering has started outside. So I have gotten about 4 pages in to the second section of the book, the second half of the book, part 2, chapter 1, part 2. And we're getting to see Giovanni now and understanding a little bit more about who he is. It's interesting because I talked about how what's the word I'm looking for? I spoke about how poignantly, it's a hard word to say, James Baldwin wrote about women, or a woman in this book. And now we get to see Giovanni's point of view of women. And he doesn't have a very high opinion of us. There are a couple of passages where he says how he feels. I think I will read those to you. I think you might find those interesting. Like the contrast that is painted in the book. Mostly, though, we find that Giovanni is jealous of David's fiance, which, of course, he is. And he's letting his jealousy show. But yeah, let me read the passage to you. I find it very interesting. It all seemed very funny. I could not stop laughing. "Do you have a mistress?" I asked him. "Not now," he said, "but perhaps I will again one day." He half frowned, half smiled. "I don't seem to be very interested in women right now. I don't know why. I used to be. Perhaps I will be again," he shrugged. "Perhaps it is because women are just a little more trouble than I can afford right now. Et puis." He stopped. I wanted to say that it seemed to me that he had taken a most peculiar road out of his trouble, but I only said after a moment cautiously, "You don't seem to have a very high opinion of women." "Oh, women. There's no need, thank heaven, to have an opinion about women. Women are like water. They are tempting like that. They can be that treacherous, and they can seem to be that bottomless, and they can be that shallow and that dirty." He stopped. "I perhaps don't like women very much. That's true. That hasn't stopped me from making love to many and loving one or two, but most of the time, I made love only with the body." "That can make one very lonely," I said. I had not expected to say it. He had not expected to hear it. He looked at me and reached out and touched me on the cheek. "Yes," he said. "Then I am not trying to be méchant when I talk about women. I respect women very much for their inside life, which is not like the life of a man." "Women don't seem to like that idea," I said. "Oh, well," said Giovanni, "these absurd women running around today, full of ideas and nonsense and thinking themselves equal to men. Quelle rigolade. They need to be beaten half to death so they can find out who rules the world." I laughed. "Did the women you knew like to get beaten?" He smiled. "I don't know if they liked it, but a beating never made them go away." We both laughed. So we're starting to see that Giovanni does not elicit the most sympathy. I feel as though Mr. Baldwin is doing this on purpose. We already know that the outcome for Giovanni is not going to be good. And maybe he just doesn't want us to sympathize with him too much. Maybe it softens the blow of losing him. Because initially, when he first meets Giovanni, Giovanni is like everything to him as far as how he looks and how intoxicating he is and how he must indulge in the waters of Giovanni. That's the way it's written. And now we're starting to see that he's changing, or it feels as though Mr. Baldwin is trying to convey that either he's changing or we weren't getting the real Giovanni. So I just feel like this is his way of kind of not letting us get too involved with the character. Maybe he wasn't such a great guy. I don't know. I still feel like it's going to be heartbreaking in the end, though. I feel as though a lot of what Giovanni is saying about women is because of jealousy. He doesn't want David. He doesn't want David to go back to Hela. So that's where we are. But I think I'm going to stop here. I don't have that much more left of the book. I am about halfway through. So I think I can get it done. Today or tomorrow, which is kind of nice. Not that I'm ready to move on to another book. I'm actually enjoying this story. I think I have a 30 book goal for this year. And I think I'm only about 8 books in. So, it's still April, so I have time. But I don't want to get too complacent. I do want to reach my goal this year, or at least really try. So I'm going to put this book down for now, but we will definitely revisit soon. Read it. Hey. Read it. Hey. Read it. Hey. Read it. Hey. So hubby made avocado toast. Well, he made the smash for the avocado toast, and I'm going to build my toast. So underneath the smash, I have truffle mayonnaise. I'm obsessed with truffle mayonnaise. I have the avocado. I'm going to sprinkle on a little Parmesan cheese. Not a whole lot, just enough for flavor. So, or else I can just do this. I'll just do that instead, since the Parmesan cheese won't let me be great. To sprinkle a little bit of the Japanese multi-purpose furikake seasoning. This is the Nikokomi, I think that's what this says, Norikomi. Because nori is seaweed, I think, right? I think. Anyway, I'm gonna sprinkle a little of this on. And it does have sesame seeds in it. However, I'm also going to sprinkle on a little bit of the everything but the bagel seasoning because I like the flavor. Just a tiny bit though, because that's more sesame seeds. And I'm going to top it off with Nona Pia's balsamic glaze. This is what sets it off. Let's see if I can make it pretty. I'm doing it for the camera, so probably not. Ooh, it's kind of pretty. And this is my avocado toast. Here is a recap of all the ingredients. It's the avocado, the guacamole, the avocado smash with the truffle mayonnaise, Parmesan cheese, the furikake seasoning, everything but the bagel seasoning, which I need to close, and the balsamic glaze. So let's taste it, even though I know what it tastes like. So let's have a taste. I just used regular white bread this time, but sometimes I use sourdough. Sometimes I use my daughter's homemade bread when we have it. Hopefully she can hear me because we need some more. Okay, let's see. It's the perfect breakfast. It's so good. You should try it. All right, I'm gonna finish this. I've changed clothes. I'm going to the coffee shop. But this was so good. But yeah, I need to make some notes about the book. Sit with my thoughts for a minute. It was so good, y'all. And then I'll come back with my final summary of the book, which will contain spoilers. So this is probably the time for you if you don't want to know the exact story of the book, or you don't want to hear things that, you know, might give it away. This is probably the time now to either fast forward or meet me in the next video. All right, so now I'm going to try to attempt to sum up this book for you guys and give you my thoughts. So basically, this is the spoiler now. If you don't want spoilers, this is probably time to exit the video. You can come back though when I'm done, or you can just meet me in the next video, like I said. But here we are. So this book, this 164-page book, or 69, I can't remember. I think I did say it in the beginning of the video though. It was a masterpiece. The way that James Baldwin painted these characters, you have Giovanni, whose room we go to, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. You have David, who is the narrator and actually the main character. You have Hella, who is his girlfriend. You have side characters, Jacques, ends with an S, and Guillaume, two unsavory fellas who both Giovanni and David find themselves to be friends with. Those are the main people. There are other people thrown in there, There are other people thrown in there that don't really matter in the big scheme of things, but they kind of make the story go along. But these are your main people. Okay, so Guillaume owns a bar. Jacques is David's friend. David and Guillaume are friends. They frequent Guillaume's bar. Guillaume finds young men, takes them off the street, young boys, takes them off the street, gives them jobs and expects favors from them. So we're dealing with that. All of this is set in 1950s Paris. David, around 26, 27 years old, he is in a relationship with a young lady named Hella. We already know that he's not sure about who he is or what he's doing. He's not sure, but he has a lot of affection for Hella. And at some point he does propose to her, so she becomes his fiance. But Hella also doesn't kind of know where she stands with David either. So both of them are from America. Both of them met in France, even though they were from America. They hit it off. They hung out with each other. They like each other a lot. They really do. But neither of them are sure if, they want to settle down, which makes sense for young people. They were living their lives. Anyway, Hella decides to go to Spain for a couple months by herself, which I don't know was common to do in the 50s. Maybe it was. I don't know. She was traveling the world. She wanted to know who she was. She went by herself. So that was a little odd to me, but at the same time, it's not odd because people do it all the time now. It just never occurred to me that people did it back then too. But she did. So she was gone. And while she was gone, poor David, I guess, didn't know what to do with his little self. So he was hanging out with Jacques. They went to the bar. He meets Giovanni, and instantly there's a connection because Giovanni's Italian and beautiful. And he comes off as being this strong, confident, sexy man. And somehow Giovanni and David end up spending pretty much the spring into the summer in Giovanni's room. And it's very interesting because while David had an encounter with a man before, he did not chalk it up to this being who he was. He really believed that he was a straight man who wanted a traditional family, who wanted to be with one woman and live life and go to work and come home to her, clean house and kids and all that. That is what he believed that he was supposed to be. But his encounters were more than that because he was not that. That is not really what he wanted. But he didn't know it at first. So he's with Giovanni, but then Hella decides that, no, I want to be with David. I'm going to be with him. And so she writes and says she's coming home. And during that time, even though David had a lot of love for Giovanni, he knew that he probably needed to get away because Giovanni was very troubled, mentally troubled. Now, Giovanni had apparently been married, but his relationship went south when they lost a baby and he could not handle it. So he was not a very strong man after all, which was a problem for David. David also had a problem with Giovanni because he realized that Giovanni wanted to make him the little wife or the little woman at home. At least that's the way he felt. And that's what the dynamic of their relationship was. And so David knew that while he wanted to be with Giovanni, he didn't want that. Very interesting. There's a lot of nuance in this book. A lot of nuance. So how it all comes to a head. Well, Hella comes back and David decides to be with Hella. That's who he wants to be. Giovanni doesn't take it well. Giovanni also loses his job. Guillaume fires him because Guillaume was jealous of Giovanni and David's relationship and was under the impression that because he took Giovanni off of the street, gave him a job, made him respectable, that he owed him some sort of favors because that's the type of person that Guillaume was. Guillaume and Jacques were very unsavory characters. In the end, Guillaume, tries some things with Giovanni, and Giovanni ends Guillaume's life, which of course then means that he's in trouble. And it all comes to a head when Hella discovers that David is in fact gay. She finds him with a Navy guy because once he finds out that Giovanni has been sentenced to death. He kind of loses it. He's not interested in Hella anymore. He's having all these feelings. Hella knows what's going on, but she doesn't really want to acknowledge it. And she ends up leaving him because she finds out that who he really is. And she's devastated. And Giovanni gets sentenced to death. And he, at the end, is executed. And that's the story. Yeah. Now we know all throughout the story that Giovanni's going to get executed. We know what happens before it happens. We know this is going to happen. But the way that it is written, you're wanting to get to the end because you want to know how. You want to know what happened. Like, how did we get here? Right? So there's that part of the story. Then there's the underlying tension because these are gay people during a time when in America it's illegal to be gay. In France or Paris, not so illegal, but definitely still frowned upon. And I do believe at the time in Italy, it really wasn't acceptable either. So it was always looked upon as their dirty secret. So there was that part. So of course, even though David may have somewhat had the desire that he wanted to live a traditional life, I think it was more because he believed that's all he could live was a traditional life. But he also knew that he didn't want to be the little woman for Giovanni either. And I think that when I see people talk about this book or I see reviews about it, a lot of the times people leave that part out. So while he did want to be with a man, I think he still felt like he didn't want to be emasculated either. And he felt that to be very emasculating. He seemed to have a lot of respect for women too. And that was something that Giovanni didn't seem to have. And we would need a whole other book to unpack that. But all in all, the way that it was written, the way that the story was told, the beautiful language, the way that James Baldwin wrote, he writes poetry in prose and it is just stunning. It kept me engaged and wanting more, and I couldn't put it down. The last 40 pages, I just had to sit down and finish them. And I actually got a little annoyed when I got interrupted because I was at a pivotal part and I just was hungry for more. So I do highly recommend this book. I give it 5 stars. I think it is actually incredible. And I did not expect that. I didn't know what to expect with this book, honestly. But if you like a good story that examines people's attitudes, that examines people's motives and their choices, you will love this book. And if you like descriptive, beautiful, sometimes a little too flowery language, I think if I had a couple of gripes that I kind of had with the book was one, that there was a figure that was introduced that was kind of shadowy. I don't really know what Baldwin was trying to say about this figure. I almost felt like he was saying, because he said it's like not a male, but not a female. It was very strange, almost as if it wasn't even a real person that came in as some foreshadowing. And we never see that person again. We never see anything about that person again. And we don't really know what that is. And maybe I'll have to go back and reread and see what that was all about. But we don't hear from that person again, and I feel like that was a loose end. And then also at some parts, I felt like maybe the language was just a little too embellished, like he was doing a little too much. But maybe that's me not understanding his point of reference, maybe just not being well versed in the context that he was using. And that can often happen. Future me popping in. Here's one of the examples when I say that maybe the language got a little too flowery. He says, I turned to face her very quickly, or as though strong hands on my shoulders had turned me around. The room was darkening. She lay on the bed watching me, her mouth slightly open and her eyes like lights. I was terribly aware of her body and of mine. I walked over to her and put my head on her breast. I wanted to lie there, hidden and still. But then, deep within, I felt her moving, rushing to open the gates of her strong, walled city and let the King of Glory come in. The last part, that part was just a little too much for me. I do know that James Baldwin was a preacher at one point, and that he does use and that he did use a lot of like scriptural references in his writing. His writing could come off as very biblical. And I think that that was an example there. I've since learned that because typically when I read an author that writes this well, I really want to know more about them as an author. I mean, I know that he's an activist. I know that he was an activist, and I know that he talked a lot about race relations, and he had a very, love-hate relationship with his country. I know that about him, but as an author, as someone who writes fiction, I wanted to delve a little deeper. And so for me, when I read that, it was a little too, it's kind of weird to say, but a little too embellished for me. And that's really where I will notice. Well, it's really rare that I will talk about something like that in a book, but it's like one of my only critiques of the book. Like I have two very tiny critiques of a book. And I think when something is almost too good and almost like perfect, you kind of have to find something like to say that's like not necessarily positive, just to make sure that it's real, just to keep it human. And so for me, that line kind of stood out as a little cheesy, but other than that, like I have no complaints, and I'm definitely not giving this less than 5 stars because of one line or because of one loose end that I felt like may or may not have needed to be tied up. That's more like me just saying that, like, in a book that was pretty much perfect, the 3 things that probably stood out. The 3 things that stood out the most to me as being not so perfect were the fact that it ended too soon. I wanted to know more. That little weird embellished line was strange for me. And then, of course, not knowing who that dark figure was. And you know what? Maybe that was his version of the devil. You know what I mean? Which is eerie and strange. And maybe we'll see that character reemerge in other works of fiction of his, because I really do want to read more. Now, you know, I'm the type of person who I read a book at face value. I read it for what the author has given me, and I accept what the author has given me. I don't try to change it. I don't try to change the story. And honestly, with this one, I just wanted more. Like, I wanted to know, like, where did David end up? And, you know, did people actually find out that, you know, Guillaume was horrible, or did anybody ever admit that? And, you know, we know what becomes of Giovanni, but I don't know. Did anybody ever say, like, no, like, this is what happened to him and we should consider that? So it's very tragic, but also, like, very enlightening. And it makes me question a lot of things. It makes you question your relationships. Right now, a big conversation on TikTok is whether straight women should date bisexual men, and a lot of straight women don't want to, and or men on the down low. Obviously, you don't know if you're dating someone on the down low. But this book would be a good read for all parties involved, because people get hurt, and a lot of feelings and bad things can happen. And I think that, you know, sometimes you need to hear another story or another side of the story, or hear a version of the story to know why you feel the way that you feel. A lot of the time, people believe that when a woman doesn't want to date someone who's bisexual, that she is homophobic. And I'm not going to say how I feel about that one way or the other, but I'm going to say that there are a lot of stories out there. And this one would definitely be one to consider if you found yourself in that conundrum, or at least to give a perspective or two on why or why not that would be a bad idea. So that's kind of how I'm relating it to my life right now. And that's just because that's what's going on. And that's something that I've been seeing here while I'm reading the book. I think a couple years ago, 5 years ago, I would have seen it totally different. But right now, I feel like having that conversation, I'm not really having it, but I'm seeing the conversation and then reading the book. People really don't know what they want sometimes, and sometimes that can hurt other people. And so I just think one of the things that we need to be concerned with when going into relationships is really knowing who we are, if you have that option. I mean, I got married when I was a child, so I had to grow with my spouse. But nowadays people wait until they're 40 and 50 and 60 years old to get married. So My biggest takeaway from it is know who you are before you bring someone else into your. My biggest takeaway is know who you are before you bring someone else into your mess. And those of you who are going into a situation where it could be messy, decide just how much mess you're willing to take before you have to set boundaries. I think that's what this book says to me. All right, so that's it. I hope you enjoyed my review of the book, and I really enjoyed reading it. I am already on to the next book. Look at me. So, yeah, I have nothing else. Check out Giovanni's room if you think you might be interested, and I will see you in the next one.